Well, R. Kelly is back in the news. He is indicted on a new sex trafficking charge, or should I say charges. And so, actually, I've been seeing this, and it's not just R. Kelly who's in the news. We also have Weinstein in the news, who he recently received. Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison for sexually assaulting two women in New York. And so I'm going to get into actually both of these articles because this is pretty heavy stuff. This one right here is really short. So it says R. Kelly is facing more criminal charges in a superseding indictment against Kelly filed today as of March 13th, that was, in Brooklyn federal court and viewed by the Pitchfork. Kelly is accused of transporting a minor who is identified as Jane Doe number 5 across state lines with an intent to engage in sexual activity. In addition, Kelly is accused of coercing the minor into sexual activity and transmitting herpes to this child or this minor. Kelly's actions allegedly occurred in 2015. So R. Kelly is facing federal charges in Chicago in addition to that, to the federal charges in Brooklyn and the state charges in Illinois and also in Minnesota, and he has not pleaded guilty to all of the counts against him. And so when reached by Pitchfork, R. Kelly's attorney, Douglas C. Anton, said that it seems that the government has sought to add additional allegations as to allege conduct with what they believe to be more specificity, or may not even specifically, or specificities, the way they have it worded here. But anyway, there is another article that is also going along with the same article that I saw earlier this week. R. Kelly knowingly and intentionally gave women herpes through non-consensual unprotected sex, prosecutors say. And this came out in the Wrap. And so here's R. Kelly pictured here. Okay? So R. Kelly hit with sexual misconduct charges from two new accusers. So he is really taking it every which way. So New York prosecutors filed new charges against disgraced singer R. Kelly on Friday, claiming that Kelly knowingly and intentionally had unprotected sex with women and a young girl without telling them that he had herpes. This was in 2015 and all through to 2017. So new criminal charges that were filed in the Eastern District of New York related to the reckless endangerment and knowing exposure of infectious venereal disease, according to the filings. The indictment did not disclose the exact age of the young girl, identified as Jane Doe number 5, of course, but prosecutors did indicate that she was under the age of 18, which is in the state here in the U.S. still considered a minor. At least in certain states, the states that he was pursuing these young women, and it had contracted, this young girl had contracted a venereal disease, which they call herpes. And so, according to the earlier government filings, as reported, New York Times, a woman identified as Jane Doe number 6 also first met Kelly at a concert when she was about 19 years of age in 2017, and she had ended her relationship with Kelly after discovering she had contracted an infectious venereal disease as well from the singer, the filing also stated. And so one of Kelly's attorneys, Steve Greenberg, responded to the new charges on Twitter, having now had the opportunity to review the latest superseding indictment against at Kelly or at R. Kelly. We do not believe it fundamentally changes anything. So Douglas Anton, one of Kelly's attorneys, did not immediately respond to the rap request for comment regarding the latest charges. So a grand jury in Brooklyn indicted R. Kelly last July on 5 counts, including the racketeering and transporting people across the state lines to commit sexual crimes, or sex crimes rather. R. Kelly has pleaded not guilty to the accusations, or should I say the alleged accusations, that he had led a criminal enterprise to recruit women and young girls to engage in illegal sexual activities. And so he is scheduled to appear in a Brooklyn courtroom in July. And so this is really, really bad. And so it says R. Kelly faces additional charges from 2 victims in Brooklyn case. And so you see him pictured here. And so it is not a good look for R. Kelly at this time. And over here, Weinstein. Wow. Harvey Weinstein is sentenced to 23 years in prison. Why? 23 years in prison for sexually assaulting 2 women in New York. And here he is pictured here. And more recently, 2 days ago, it said that he is being hospitalized. And he has a trial in LA coming up. And so that is not a good look for him either. And so, as it says here, it says, New York, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced Wednesday to 23 years in prison for sexually assaulting 2 women, punctuating a landmark case against the once powerful movie producer whose downfall brought attention to the Me Too, #MeToo movement. So in its verdict, February the 24th, a jury found Weinstein, 67 years old, forced oral sex on a former production assistant, Miami Haley, now who is 42 years of age, at his apartment in 2006, and raped one-time aspiring actress Jessica Mann, now who is 34 years of age, at a DoubleTree hotel in 2013. So the sentence is seen as a victory to the #MeToo movement, which has toppled numerous powerful men accused of sexual misconduct in the recent years, transforming the conversation around sexual or assault, harassment, and gender. And so Weinstein's trial was hailed by advocates as the step forward for sexual or assault survivors, especially given that Mann and Haley continued their relationship with him after the indictments, and such scenarios were previously considered very difficult to prosecute. Before the Justice James Burke announced the sentence, both of the women read impact statements, and the prosecutor, Joan Eluzzi Orban, argued for the maximum of 29 years in prison. So the judge also heard from Weinstein's attorneys and the client himself, who compared the #MeToo movement to the McCarthyism while playing down his clout in Hollywood and touting his charitable work. So Haley said that the events she described in her testimony altered the course of my life significantly, adding, I'm relieved that there are women out there who are safer because he's not out there. So she choked up while discussing her testimony. I showed up not as a perfect victim, but as a human being. Haley added that her life has been in shambles since she decided to come forward and expose herself to scrutiny, and that she had feared Weinstein's retribution as well. So I had, in quotes, I had panic attacks, nightmares. I feared for my life. That is coming from Haley. A man wearing a sweater that read, "Give me love," in quotes, focused on why she did not physically resist Weinstein. So telling the judge that it was a common response for a rape victim. So she said that the producer had every advantage over me, And so this was during a time when women felt powerless to speak out and come forward and say anything. I take it's what she is relating to. So, given the immense physical stature of Harvey Weinstein's height and weight and ox-like strength, and so she also addressed the discovery of Weinstein's many non-disclosure agreements with accusers of sexual misconduct and the people in the world who knew about him or knew about them. And so my rape was preventable, but this was a known offender. So he's sketched in this picture here in a wheelchair, and later Weinstein spoke from a wheelchair, as you see here. And it says at the defense table, first, to all the women who testified, we may have different truths, but I have great remorse for you, he began. So he struggled that the wave of sexual misconduct accusations against powerful men in recent years has gone too far. Just like the McCarthyism, there was a scar, and that's what's happening and what's happening now all over this country. And so after several minutes, his attorneys tried and failed to put the brakes on his rant. So he insisted he had true friendship and wonderful times with Haley and Mann. Listed off times, and he listed off times when they asked him for favors, and I'm totally confused, and I think men are confused about all of their issues, he said. And so he also argued that he had no great powers in this industry, and that his famed independent production company, Miramax, was not as powerful as the bigger studios. Regarding the charge from many of his accusers that he had threatened to derail their careers if they spoke out. So I couldn't blackball anybody, because if I said, don't use this actress, Warner Brothers would have said, I'm going to use them just to spite him. So he highlighted his efforts to raise funds for the 9/11 victims and families, as well as those affected by the Hurricane Sandy. And so he had said that he has not seen his 3 oldest children since October 2017, when the New Yorker and the New York Times published its initial set of sexual misconduct allegations against him. So I just have no idea what they're doing, and I have no communication with them. That for me is hell on earth. And so if I had to do it over again, Weinstein said he would care less about the movies and care more about his children and family and other people and friends in his life. Quote. So while pushing for the maximum sentence, Illuzi Orban argued that Weinstein lived a life rooted with criminality that has gone unchecked for decades. The young, struggling dreamers were not even people to him. She said that of his accusers, and so he could take what he wanted, knowing there was very little anyone could do about it, she added. And so he was addicted to the conquest. And so all 6 of Weinstein's accusers from the trial sat together in the front row. And when the judge adjourned, they shed tears and embraced, and they left the courtroom to cheers and applause. So we thank the court for imposing a sentence that puts sexual predators and abusive partners in all segments of society on notice, said a statement from Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus R. Vance Jr., who was sitting with the accusers. And so other legal experts watching the case called it a significant sentence. Lead Weinstein attorney Donna Rotuno blasted the sentence outside the courtroom, calling the length of time obscene and obnoxious, and the accusers, the jury, and the judge of caving to the public pressure. Okay, so these are some more sketches. This is a story of the Hollywood unique power structure enables sexual harassment to remain the entertainment industry's open secret. And so Weinstein still faces charges in LA for alleged assault on an Italian actress whose name has never been disclosed, and Lauren Marie Young, 30 years of age, one of the three accusers who testified at his Manhattan trial as supporting witnesses. Young has alleged that Weinstein trapped her in a Beverly Hills hotel suite bathroom in February of 2013 and masturbated while groping her. And so the Los Angeles or LA County District Attorney's Office announced Wednesday that the extradition process has now begun. Okay, so though it was not immediately clear Weinstein would first be transferred to an upstate New York prison before being removed, or whether he could challenge the extradition, so his health could also complicate this process as well. Weinstein's attorneys are expected to appeal his verdict on several grounds, including their argument that the three support accusers' testimony unfairly prejudiced the jury, and that the juror number 11, an author whose novel relates to the predatory older men, according to the description of the juror's website, was allowed to remain in the trial, and it is rare for an appeals court to reverse a jury conviction in order of a new trial. So the judge gave Weinstein 20 years on top count criminal sex act in the first degree against Haley out of a maximum of 25, so he tacked on 3 years for the third degree rape against Mann out of the maximum of 4. And so the minimum total sentence would have been 5 years, but Weinstein exited the courtroom nearly 2 hours after his sentencing ended, and guards armed with semi-automatic rifles stood by a bus rolled out of a loading dock with lights flashing and sirens blaring. Weinstein could be seen inside wearing a defeated look and a set of tan short-sleeve jail scrubs. So he arrived at the Rikers Island jail complex but was taken to the Bellevue Hospital after complaining of chest pains. And so at the trial, jurors found Weinstein not guilty of the counts of predatory sexual assault, which would have acknowledged that actress Annabella, I guess it's Ciora's. I may not be pronouncing her Ciora's allegation, and so that he had raped her in her apartment in the late 1993 of the early 1994. So Ciora attended the sentencing and left hand in hand with actress Rosie Perez, who had testified in support of her account as well. So on Friday, Illuzi Orban stated in a memo to the judge that it is totally appropriate in this case to communicate to a wider audience that sexual assault, even if perpetrated upon acquaintance or in a professional setting, is a serious offense worthy of a lengthy prison sentence. So Illuzi Orban cited 36 allegations of sex crimes and other forms of abuse dating back since even as 1970s, which he argued established throughout his entire adult professional life. Defendant has displayed a staggering lack of empathy, treating others with disdain and inhumanity. So at the sentencing, Burke stated, so there is evidence before me of other incidences of sexual assault involving a number of women, all of which are legitimately consideration for the sentence. So Weinstein's attorneys, meanwhile, argued for the maximum sentence of 5 years, saying that he has already been subject to enough suffering Mr. Weinstein cannot walk outside without being heckled, so he has lost his means of earning a living, and his fall from grace has been historic, perhaps unmatched in the age of social media, and his team wrote in a letter to the judge on Monday. And so at the trial, Weinstein was shamed by the witnesses' accounts of what they described as his abhorrent hygiene and deformed genitalia, and the attorney said. And so, deserved or not, this is certainly a unique and extremely severe consequence that Mr. Weinstein had to endure. So Weinstein was free on a $2 million bail bond during the trial, but had his bail revoked after the guilty verdict. So at that point, he had spent no more than a few hours in custody for processing since his arrest in May of 2018. So his spokesman said that after the verdict, he was taken to Bellevue and had heart surgery to have a stent implanted before he was taken to Rikers. So his team was alluded to the various other health conditions, and he attended his trial with the aid of a walker, attributed to his back surgery weeks before the proceeding, though it was criticized by many as a stunt to elicit sympathy. Okay, so in their memo, the judge and the attorney said, given his age and specific medical risk factors, an additional term of imprisonment above the mandatory minimum, although the grave reality is that Mr. Weinstein may not even outlive that term, is likely to constitute a de facto life sentence. So that's pretty much the article and what goes down on Weinstein's case. And so this was pretty serious. Okay. And so I thought this was pretty serious enough to read, to include into, what has been going on in terms of the Weinstein issue. And so going back to the R. Kelly, what happened with R. Kelly, both him and Weinstein, wow. R. Kelly, and then you got Weinstein. Wow, really bad. And so here, like I was telling you, that Weinstein, he has been hospitalized. And so here it is here. Recently, I believe they said that he has a trial coming up here in Los Angeles, and that he will, Harvey Weinstein's still in the hospital and facing a trial in LA. What happens next? And so that is here, Harvey Weinstein, and he has trouble walking because he's always with a walker, and so he was sentenced 23 years, and so this is pretty big. Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison after being convicted of 2 sex crimes. And so, yeah, so that is pretty much the deal of what happens with this. And it just seems to never end. And so, wow, pretty big stuff going on these days. Among some of the other things that are happening in these times. These are some really really tough, trying times. So what do you think about this? This is pretty deep. 23 years, and now it just seems like R. Kelly, his thing is just constantly in the news. His issues are constantly in the news. Having said that, thank you for listening.